Hi, everybody who's joining us. Let's give everybody about 30 seconds as they join us here for the Distinguished Scene Designers Forum. I'd like to thank this distinguished panel on your screen today for hosting this and allowing USITT to host it, producing it for USITT and our members or folks at large. I appreciate you doing it. What I am going to speak about while people join is housekeeping. Real quick, folks, is that you have the ability to ask questions and have answers. There's a Q&A box specifically for that, separate. You might be used to in all your other Zooms that there is a chat box. So there's two boxes today. You're going to want to open up both your Q&A and your chat. And what I'd like to ask is that in the Q&A box, you reserve that area for questions specifically to our panelists. As you type in questions, if you're in the open tab, which is up above, you'll see the questions appear. And you will also see a little thumb right under the question. You can upvote. So if you like somebody else's question, click on that upvote, the thumbs up, and the most popular questions will rise to the top. And I'm sure the panel in the next hour and a half is going to try to get to as many questions as they can. But in case you have thousands, we want to get to the most popular ones. So again, use that upvote enabler there to get out, make sure you get the answers you're here to look for. And then we do have the chat, the webinar chat. And what I'd like to do is it's a bit of an icebreaker. I'd like you to give us a shout out where you're joining us from so everybody on the screen can see where our attendance is coming from. It says chat is disabled. Well, perfect, Clothier. Thank you so much. And I will get in there and make sure chat is on. I apologize. Let me see. Panelists can chat with everyone. And attendees can chat with everyone. So if you don't mind, trying the chat again. Somebody put in where they're coming from in chat, and the person signed in as Clothier. Please let me. Oh, there we go. From Nebraska. Casey's from Nebraska. Nikki from UGA, and others chiming in now. Thanks. So feel free to use the chat box for kind of informal kind of comments. Say hello to your friends. Again, drop in there where you're joining us from so we know this for sure. We are going to, you're very welcome, Clothier. I'm not sure which one that is, so I'll just keep calling you by your last name. We are going to record this session so we can later have it available to everybody on the USITT YouTube channel. I believe that's all the housekeeping I have. You can always try to message me, but really Charlie Calvert is here to monitor this webinar. So I'm going to hand it over to Charlie so he can introduce himself, and then we'll hear from the panelists themselves because nobody wants to hear from me. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you at the end.
Christine, one thing, Eduardo needs some help signing on. If you can, you have his email address.
Eduardo?
Yeah.
Yes, I can help him in the background. Yep, I'll work on that.
Great, thank you.
No problem.
Charlie.
But I'm behind the scenes if you need me. Charlie, take it away.
Hey, everyone. My name's Charlie Calvert, and I am one of the 3 commissioners for the Scenic Design and Technology Commission within USITT. So I just wanted to say I'm going to shut up and get out of the way so we can listen to these voices here. But I just wanted to say thank you for coming, and thanks for being here. And I want to thank this group of panelists for joining us today. This is kind of a really special event for our commission. So we'll hope to have them do their own introductions here. So I mostly talked to Joe. So can I send it to you, Joe, first?
Okay, you broke up there for a second, Charlie. I didn't hear that.
I sent it to you. Can you start with your intro?
Yeah, I'm Joe Tilford. You can look me. I won't do a long self-introduction. You can look me up on joetilford.com, which is my design website. I've been in the business a very long time. I will let you know that there's some of our members who cannot make it. Ed Haynes is not able to make it, but you should look him up. Those of you in the audience, look him up, look at his website. He's a designer. Kate Edmonds will not be able to join us either. And Kevin Rigdon may be able to join us. It all depends on how his travel schedule works out this evening. So, airline delays and things like that, you never know. Otherwise, I'll hand it off to Douglas.
Hi, I'm Doug Schmidt. That's me. Ralph, take it away.
Thank you. I'm Ralph Funicello. I will say I've been designing scenery since 1969, and I've been teaching at San Diego State since 1991. Todd.
I'm Todd Rosenthal. I teach at Northwestern, and you can Google me and go onto my website to find out more about me, and I'll pass it on to Linda.
Suddenly my spacebar wasn't working. Hi, I'm Linda Buchanan. I'm a Chicago-based designer. I've been designing for 50 years, I just realized. And I taught at the theater school at DePaul for almost 30 years. Retired from that, still designing. And that's pretty much it. Oh, I guess I should hand it off to Mike, but I don't know if he's able to speak with us yet.
Mike
guess
is
the
having
answer is no.
Mike will I guess type in answers when he has them. All right. Well, let me toss it back to Linda, because this topic was an idea that came from a conversation with Linda. And I think it's a good topic, but Linda, why don't you just get us kicked off on this?
Yes, the reason I suggested this topic was, for many years I would interview scene design students and prospective students, and one of the questions that I always asked was, where do you see yourself in 5 years, and where do you see yourself in 10 years? And usually answers would center around, well, in 5 years, I see myself designing theater. And in 10 years, I see myself designing on Broadway. And so as exciting as that dream might be, I think it's helpful for students to get maybe a little more perspective on what your expectations might be as you head out of school. I've noticed more recently, I think, that students seem to have more unrealistic expectations about how far they might get in 5 or 10 years. And while I don't want to discourage anyone, I mean, there's lots of great stuff to do out there. It might not necessarily be on Broadway in 10 years. So that being said, I think it's worth considering, thinking about what a plan might be, or what you think you would, how you think you might plan out your career, and what moves you want to make first. And I think it's worth thinking about those things even when you're still in school. For instance, I've had someone, an old friend of mine, his daughter's applying to design schools, and she was asked, one of the things she was asking me was, should I be trying to get professional work right away while I'm still in school? And honestly, I don't know that I think that's the best option. I think, when you get to your maybe 3rd and 4th years, or if you're in grad school, maybe it's a different story. You have some skills that are marketable at that point, and people might want to give you a job that doesn't just subsist of going and getting coffee. But I think it's not really helpful to your career to think about trying to get, every paint call or every electrics call when you're in your first years, where you're really forming your skills, your basic skills. I think you have to be aware that you're already, if you're in a school where your faculty are working professionals, you are already forming your reputation in the theater community. This is something that people really don't always think about. But your faculty is seeing, are you the person who's ditching out and doing calls and not doing your homework, or not going to your theater calls, or not getting your paint elevations in on time? They are not going to recommend you when, you know, calls start coming in when you're a third or fourth year student or a grad student, and they start getting calls like, you know, do you have a recommendation of someone to do a smaller show, or someone to be an assistant, or, you know, I have to bow out of a show. Do you have somebody that can take it over for me? You're not going to be the person who's getting recommended, because your reputation is starting right now. So think about that when you're kind of deciding how much to commit yourself to your work already in school. I've always said to myself about my work, take your work seriously and yourself not. And other people have different versions of that I've heard. But I've always said that to myself. You know, a lot of students, I had a lot of students who would spend a lot of time thinking up what their professional name was going to be, or designing their fabulous logo. And I think your time at that point is better used by, you know, really honing your drafting skills and really honing your sketching skills. And I know that the rest of this panel has probably wiser words than me, but just to start things off, I just think it's worth, you know, your career is starting now, and it's worth kind of trying to think about planning that. Sounds like Ralph has something to say.
I might jump in. I would say if we're talking about undergraduate level, I think one of the first things you have to try to figure out is if a life in the theater is really suitable for you. And I found, you know, back in the day, summer stock was a great place, the great thing to do, to work in summer theater. And there's still summer theaters around. I don't know that they're called summer stock anymore, but, you know, immerse yourself in the theater and find out if these kind of people, I mean, because it's different than, I find, different than the rest of the world. And you really have to see if it's suitable, if it's the life that you
Exactly
want.
so.
Otherwise, don't pursue it. You know, you can stay involved in the theater on a community theater basis or on a volunteer basis. You can still work in the theater, but if you really want to do it as a vocation for the rest of your life, you need to find out if it's suitable, if it really is the world you want to live in.
Yeah, Ralph, I agree, and I think one of the things, you know, we're talking about a career being a set designer. I think one of the things that is important to find out as early as possible is, do you love designing? I mean, you know, or do you just want to be the designer, have the title? Do you love the actual work of sitting at the drawing board with your pencil in your hand and a blank piece of paper and struggling your way to a design? Because if you don't love the work, you're not gonna give it everything you need to give it. So I think that finding out early on if you love designing is really an important of setting the tone for the path you're going to follow.
Great.
Yeah, the dream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a difference too between the social aspect of theater and theater companies and putting on a play, which is very heady. You know, it's very seductive. It's a big, you know, can be a big, wonderful family that embraces you and you embrace it. That's different than sitting in the studio by yourself, or maybe with an assistant if you're lucky, you know, struggling with the blank page and the empty model box, trying to figure out what to do. It's a very different, you know, it's not social, that part of it at all. And you know, you have to see if that's suitable. But once you've decided that this is it, you know, then what? I mean, I think obviously getting good training. I've always said that, you know, and I'm going to bring this up, but so, you know, talent, training, luck, and
Mhm.
dependability, I suppose. And then our dearly departed John Iacovelli, wonderful, wonderful man who passed away recently, wonderful designer, incredibly influential. He, for me, just added another element to that, and that is warmth and support and just being a great person, a great human being to other people. I mean, and I say that because, people, if you're a snake, no one really wants to have you around. I mean, if you're a warm, compassionate, loving, and supportive human being, you attract people. And that's what John did. I mean, and that became very apparent in all the tributes to John, that was, one of his great strengths. And I think it's a strength that that's useful for designers to have, because you have to lead a team to get your work done. You're spearheading perhaps a shop and a series of artists and artisans, and they have to follow you. They have to, you would like them to do things and create your work, and you have to be compassionate with them and friendly. Kindness. I mean, just be incredibly kind.
Yeah, people will hire you.
Says,
yeah.
Oh, sorry, Todd, you want to go?
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say I would agree with everything that Ralph says. The other thing that I would add to it, however, is you have to have a passion for it. And if you don't have a passion, it's a heartbreaking business. I have found that most of my friends that have survived the business have had that passion, and I don't think you can do it without it, because there are so many heartbreaks involved along the way. I mean, what do you do when you spent 6 months of your life working on a show that you think is the greatest thing in the world, and it closes on opening night? I've had that in spades. You have to be able to rise above that and just enjoy the business and the people in it. That's my experience anyway.
Yeah, I think Ralph and Doug, both here are talking about, it's like in talking about John Iacovelli, it's this loving heart, and because that I mean, if anyone asked me to describe John, who was a member of this group, and he just had this sort of loving heart that just embraced everyone, and I think he loved designing. And I think he had a passion for it, and I think Doug is right. There's this sense that you really have to love doing the work, and doing the work with the people that you're blessed with in doing it. Because, we can't do it by ourselves. We make pictures and people do it. And you have to really embrace those people and the wonderful talents they have and the contributions that they make. I think one of the things you learn in undergraduate school, I mean, to take it back to the idea of we're talking about the very earliest development and the early steps of the path. In undergraduate school, you really learn, because it is social, and it is, we're going to make this thing happen and we're going to learn from it kind of atmosphere. And I think there's something about that can really light a fire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lighting designer once said to me, I said, how do you pick your assistants? And he said, the most important, well, first of all, they have to know how to do the job. But the second most important thing is, do I want to have dinner with them every night?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you have to think about you know, our time commitments are so intense when we work on a project. Our relationships with people are so close that I think you have to not only bring the skills, but you have to bring the, you know, the love of collaborating and the love of working with a team. That's so important. And I think especially if you're, well, I don't know what kind of designer we may have designers, various kinds of designers here, but in our audience, but as a set designer, you know, you have such a huge posse to help you. And it's really important to really appreciate those people and work well with them. I mean, to get, you know, to give them a good process as well as yourself. And that's, you know, that's the same thing, whether you're an assistant helping somebody else do their process, or whether you're the designer who's helping the prop artisan fulfill something that you need. That's the same skill set, really. And I think it's something that's really important. But at some point, I think we, maybe not now is the time, but I think we probably ought to touch on realistic expectations also, as what will you actually be doing your first few years out? You know, I think that might be something.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that very much. In fact, I thought you should retitle this chat, prepare for the best outcome, but expect the worst, because it's really it really can be dispiriting sometimes.
You know, that early in my career, I worked with a old named Jay Devenbrock. I don't know if any of you ever knew Jay. He did a lot of ballet, a lot of, yeah, a terrific guy. And Jay, I was really young, and Jay said to me one day, he said, listen, what's going to happen is when you're starting out is about 1 out of every 6 shows you design will actually be a good design. And then it will be 1 out of 4. And then it will be 1 out of 2. And then it will be 2 out of 3. He said, but just stay at it. Stay at it. If you really want to do it, if you really love it, stay at it, because eventually you'll be so good that nobody notices your mistakes but you. And that was Jay.
I always felt if you had one show every year that you were really proud of, and proud of your work, but also, you know, proud of the show that you felt, you know, defined what you thought the theater was about, or whatever it was, that was enough to live on. You know, that could get you through the other ones where things went wrong, and you know, you made mistakes, other people made mistakes, it didn't come out the way you wanted. But if you got one a year, you were lucky.
And I think it's also, if you were happy with the design, regardless of what other people thought about it, right?
Yes.
I mean, that sustained me, right? Like, I've done work sometimes where critically it was not successful and the show was not successful, but I thought it was some of the best work I'd ever done. And I think that's when you know that you're a mature designer. So.
Yeah, I think that's really true, that you get to the point where you know whether your work is good, and you don't need anybody else to tell you. Eduardo is signing on. Great.
Hi, I'm sorry. I've been trying to.
Yeah, Eduardo, if you can turn your camera on.
Yes.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh.
We can see you now, Eduardo, and we can hear you too. Great.
Oh, hello, Doug.
Hi.
Mwah. Praise to God for Doug.
You know, so one of the things pathwise that I think is our audience would probably like to hear about is our opinions about whether grad school is a necessary or important or the best way to clear the path and get moving with a career. Because the undergrad is mostly about sort of getting the passion, but grad school is really a different animal altogether.
I will throw in 2 cents or 4 cents. If you ever in your mind think that at some point you would like to teach in a university, you should get an MFA, because there are many schools that will not hire you if you do not have an MFA. Now, if you, and that even, I mean, there are school, my university where I teach, and doesn't mean this is a good thing or a bad thing, but they will not hire anyone for a tenure track position who does not have an MFA. They don't care what your professional things are. I teach there. I have an endowed chair. I don't have a tenure track position. I have it's a different animal. So it didn't, because I only have a BFA degree. But if you ever think you might want to teach, you must have an MFA to make money.
I think schools are pulling back on that. At Northwestern, it's no longer a requirement.
Well, that's great to hear.
Commensurate professional experience is the equivalent of an MFA, and I 100% support that.
Oh,
and
I support that. I support that as well. If you don't, I mean, well, yeah, I mean, that's very good if that is happening. I've seen the opposite happening.
I know, but I think it's ridiculous that
I agree. I don't think it's good at all. I mean, there were some schools.
Your case in point, Ralph.
There are some schools that will hire you. I'm not going to mention any names, but a good friend was hired to teach at a very reputable university, and he was brought on a tenure track full professor with a BFA degree or a BA degree, and that's wonderful. I mean, and I completely applaud that, but I'm not sure everyone will do that.
I certainly think it's probably safer to have the MFA. I know at DePaul we had it was a terminal degree or commensurate experience. However, and we hired many people who were on the basis of their experience rather than their degree. However, when it came to tenure review, it could sometimes get a little dicey with trying to make the argument to the other departments that were not theater departments to those faculty. And that might be a little more heady than we really need to get into here. But I just would say, Ralph's point that, it's more of a sure thing with the MFA, certainly. Would that be, unless you really know you want to teach, would that be the thing to make your decision around? I don't know, but I do think when students get to the point of grad school, they're often in a different place mentally and maturity wise. And I think they are ready to do a deeper kind of work. That's not true of every student. I certainly had many students who only got BFA degrees and were better designers than me. But then certainly there were many whose work was quite immature still, and I think would have been helped by, further focused study.
Yeah, I also think with that being said, I don't think it's really necessary to go to grad school right after undergrad. I really,
Absolutely.
some of our best students have been students in their late 30s and 40s. So you only get to go to grad school once, and the older you are, the more mature you are. If you work in the profession, the more you know what grad school needs to be for you. So I think that's important.
No, I think that really is. I think that really is important, because the getting out of undergraduate school and getting into the business for a while, and finding out how things work, it makes it possible for you to make a better choice in going to grad school, and it also helps you figure out what kind of mentor you're looking for in grad school, because your faculty is going to be your mentor. It isn't the name of the grad school that is important. It's the results of the grad school that's important. Is what do you get out of it, and are you going to school studying with someone whose work you admire and whose approach you feel is something that you can learn from? I think that's really important. I mean, certainly when I was coming up in the business, grad school was not really all that important. I mean, you just worked. But I think nowadays it really is the best way to get the mentoring and the focused instruction and the feedback and the atmosphere that you need to be able to work at becoming a designer.
One thing I will reinforce that Joe briefly touched on is that I think, I strongly believe that it's a big mistake to go straight from undergrad to grad. Really do not believe in that. And I really think that getting some, practical experience, 2 years is what I think is most beneficial.
Agreed.
And I also
Get
think
out in the
grad
real
school
world.
is a place you go to dream, right? I think you can get mired in limitations, and I think that just being able to dream and being in the umbrella of a grad school with mentorship, I mean, for me, that was really, really, really imperative. And I also think too, going back to Ralph's point about being isolated in your studio, and I agree that that's an isolated experience, but also you are part of a larger community. And I don't think I would be a designer if it weren't for Ralph, if it wasn't for Linda. I mean, all these people who I reached out to as a young designer and you, Joe, I mean, it was hugely influential. So there's a really, really, really big parachute that you can reach out to. And I think that's at the spirit of this whole forum. So
Yeah.
I will say this, I've said this to Doug, but I saw when I was at New York University, I walked over to the Public Theater once and saw a set of Douglas's on stage. It was the first year the Public Theater was in operation. And that set has influenced me for the rest of my life. I mean,
What was the show?
I can see that. I can't even remember the name of the play, but I can see that influence in a lot of work that I've done recently, even. And it was, I mean, that's just what it is,
Very
so
flattered.
well, no, it's absolutely true. It's true. I mean, it's the truth. I think graduate school is also a place where you meet some of the people that you're going to be spending the rest of your life working with, and that's a wonderful thing.
I think that's an important point, that you have to start establishing your relationships with the other people in the business, and that's the first place you come in contact with them. I certainly did at Boston University. My first roommate became my first agent. The first fellow that tagged me to do a classroom design project for him became very influential in my life, and I went on to do a lot of projects that I got involved in, got dragooned into, frankly. But I think that's very important to make a note of that those people that you come in contact with are going to be your friends for the rest of your life, many of them, and you should take advantage of that.
So go to grad school, do a good job, study with wonderful people, and then, and I think that's always the big question. What then is that step?
Well, in the old days, which I can speak to, you hauled your portfolio around to as many people as you could dragoon into listening to you for half an hour. I found that to be a humiliating process, but ultimately it bore fruit, and you get hired for things, and you prove your mettle, and you move on. I've really enjoyed meeting so many people that way, even people that I've not continued to work for or to have a professional connection with. But it speaks to the community, I think.
For me, it was assisting. which is through after grad school, we had exactly what Doug was describing, and that's how I met Doug and how he helped me and taught me much more. And so assisting and to pay the rent, I was also a scenic artist. That's what I did.
Yeah, that's a deadly trap, that scenic artist route. I've seen a lot of good designers kind of fall into the comfort of a constant paycheck, and then they raise a family, and then they've got to do it, and then there you are. You've kind of missed your boat, and it's sort of sad sometimes to see that, because there's some very talented people that ended up with back pain.
Yeah, I think both scenic artists, scenic art and assisting, I think can both be traps. I've
Yeah.
certainly seen some people, some very talented people get stuck. And some of them love being assistants, and that's great. I mean, if that's the job you want and you're good at that, that's fabulous. But I have seen people who have, said, oh my God, I've spent 5 years doing this. I haven't tried to do any of my own work, and now I'm so hooked on the pay that I don't want to kind of drop out and go back to the level of design I would have to kind of start doing. So I think you have to be careful about that. I did the scenic artist route. I also was a TD for a while, believe it or not, because I really could not pass muster now as a TD. But I think the helpful thing for me about the scenic art was that where I was doing it as piecework, so I could fit it in between the smaller design work that I was getting when I first started out, and I could kind of drop in and out. I think it's hard if you become a staff scenic artist, then yes,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Yeah.
Working on a studio, they'd rely on you to be
Yeah, yeah.
If you have a plan, though, I will bring up, there's a fabulous lighting designer named Philip Rosenberg. And I met Philip at the Old Globe in the 90s when he was the resident assistant. And then he left the Globe and went to New York and became one of the leading associate lighting designers in New York, and making lots and lots of money. Yeah, I'm sure he bought an apartment and on Riverside Drive, and I mean, he banked his money, and he put money aside, and he called me at one point and said, Ralph, I've decided that I don't want to be an associate anymore. I want to design. I've saved money so that I can support myself for a year. Right? And I'm just looking for work as a lighting designer. And that's what he did. And he planned it and he did it. And 2 years later or 3 years later, he won a Tony as a lighting designer. And he is a major lighting designer now in New York. But he had a plan, and that's Philip's personality. He's very organized, and he had a plan and he stuck to it. So that's, you can be an assistant if you don't want to be an assistant for the rest of your life. And some people do. I mean, I know a lot of people who can't face the blank page, and they don't want to do that, but they want to design. They want to be part of the excitement and be, being an assistant can be wonderful. I mean, particularly if you're working for, generous and kind people, and don't think that's not a viable career if it's the one you want. But if you really want to do your own work, then you have to figure out how you're going to dig yourself out of that people's studios.
I think that's right. I think that having a plan is really important. I know I spent the first 5 years of my career designing a small theater that had pretty good budget. And one of the reasons they kept hiring me over and over again, every show for 5 years, is because I was willing to be the set designer, and I would throw in being the lighting designer and the TD as well. So I was sort of like, hey guys, you pay me enough and I'll do all this stuff for you. But I had a time limit on it. I was going to do that for 5 years so that I could really get the practice in and practicing the craft so that I could then move on. I think that I had a plan. I think, Ralph, you really hit it there. I think having a plan is really important because, I mean, you have to be open to opportunities and not miss opportunities because they aren't in the plan you had. But really, if what you want to do is be a designer, then at some point you have to say no to the TD job and no to the painting job and no to the money that comes with those, and stick to your guns and say, well, I'm going to be a designer.
We have a great question here in the Q&A.
Mhm.
And it has to do with a lot of what you're talking about already. So that question is about, when should a young designer think about joining a union?
I can answer that.
Uh-oh.
Ralph has a gold card.
But yes, but I'm also on the exam committee for the West Coast exam. So you can find out all you want to know about the USA on their website, United Scenic Artists 829. You don't have to be a member to get onto the website. You can find out enormous amounts of information. Basically, I will tell you, the exam is given in 3 different locations, in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. I can only really speak about the Los Angeles exam. That's the one I'm on the committee. We don't meet you in person. You submit work to the union, and the union to the head of the exam committee, and they decide whether you meet the criterias to take the exam. There is no exam. It's basically, we review your work. We review some work that you've done. But what's really important for us in Los Angeles, and I can only speak of that, is that you have enough work. People want to hire you, right? Yeah, we will not accept someone who doesn't have any professional work or any work. There's some question about whether work done for a university is acceptable, and that could be work you did while you were teaching, or work that you were hired to do if you were hired to design a show at a university. And that's in flex right now. But and I think some of the other exams do accept that. We weren't for a while. But the other important thing is, it has to do with where you live, what your address is as to which union you join. You can't decide, oh, I want to be interviewed in Los Angeles because I heard it's easier, let's say, but I actually live in New York City. No, you have to take the New York.
Can't do that. And also the criteria for the different exams is very different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very different. And I think personally, I think that the reason why you would join the union, and at some point you're going to be forced to join the union if you work at a number of Lord theaters, I think the pension is huge. And we all know, as older designers, that the pension is a big thing right now. A big deal. And also the health insurance. One thing I want to reiterate is, if you join the union and you work as a union designer, you will be, every time you work on a show, you will be contributing, or the theaters will be contributing money towards your pension and welfare, towards your health insurance. If you do not use that health insurance, you still can access that. So there's something called a medical reimbursement plan. So if you work for a university and you get your health insurance from the university, you can, if you have other expenses that are not covered by your health insurance, you can send those checks, you can send those receipts to the union, and they will send you a reimbursement for that.
It is that's major.
Yeah. Assuming you have enough in your fund.
Yeah.
You've been working enough to have enough in
But
your fund.
I do know a lot of designers who have been contributing their whole life to that fund, and they had no idea that they had access to that money.
Right.
Yeah, actually, I can speak to that. I was floored when I found out how much I was getting monthly from the pension and welfare fund, and it made all the difference, to tell you the truth.
I guess what I usually say to students who are asking about it, or graduates who are asking about when to join the union, If you want to be a painter, go ahead and take the test. That's what I did, and I started getting work right away, and that was great. If you want to be in the union as a designer, I think it makes sense to wait until you are getting hired by theaters that have union contracts.
Yeah.
Otherwise, once you join, the union can kind of tell you where you can't work, which you don't want to. Oh, Ralph is correcting me, so maybe I'm wrong.
They don't. No, they don't. Nope.
They don't do that anymore. They
Nope.
used to.
Not
You can
anymore.
work wherever you want. You can actually do non-union contract shows.
Okay, well, that's
Yep,
news to me
yep,
then, because
yep.
that was not
Only-
always the case. So good to hear.
You can, so let's be clear here. So let's say a small theater wants to hire you and they don't have any contract with the union. You could choose to use a union contract, a union form that would require them to pay a certain percentage into pension and welfare.
Mhm.
Now, it would be foolish to think that they're going to add that on top of the fee that they were going to pay you. No, they will subtract it from the fee that you negotiated, but it's a way of you keeping your health insurance up and contributing to your pension. Or if you worked at that theater, you do not have to use that contract. You can just have a letter of agreement between you and the theater and keep all the money yourself and take the money yourself. But they don't force you to. There was a huge issue of this many years ago about promulgate. I can't pronounce the word. Promulgated contracts, where sort of forcing the designer to sign to make the theater sign a union contract, and they don't do that.
Yeah, and one of the positives of having a union contract is that if they send you a writer, if the theaters always have a writer connected with their contract, nothing in that writer can detract from the union contract.
Yeah.
So there can be nothing that overrules something in the union contract that is of negative consequences to the designer, that is actually kind of huge.
Mhm.
So they can't say in the rider that Ralph is responsible for any revisions after opening, right? Because that overrules the union contract and it's instantly negated. So, and I do think if you're a young designer and you're not in the union, you should still look at that union contract and
use it as a model.
Yeah,
100%.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Use it as a model.
that's exactly what I was just about to say, was take a look at it, and it will really spell out the scope of work that you should be, asked to do. And it's really worth looking at the terms of that.
I mean, some of us on this group had to take heinous exams to get into the union.
Yes, we did.
And the hardest experience of my life. I mean, but that no longer is that no longer happens. And if you wish to be a scenic artist, particularly as a New York-based scenic artist, there is an apprenticeship program through the union where you get paid good money to work in a union scene shop under fantastic painters who train you. And basically, if you go through that apprenticeship, you will pass the exam. I mean, they will teach you everything you need to know to pass the union exam. That will, and I don't know if you don't do that, how you get in as a scenic artist. In New York, because I don't know about New York is well, tell me, maybe Chicago does. New York, I know, has scenic artists. We don't, on the West Coast, we don't represent scenic artists. So we don't.
We do in Chicago.
We do.
And how do the scenic artists get in the union in Chicago? Did they take?
Well, I took the exam. I
that
don't
was
know
a while
what's
ago.
happening now, but I would guess that there's still an exam.
I don't know if
monitored it in years.
what the exam might look like now, if there was one, or if you just show them examples of your painting.
I don't know.
Yeah.
They also do, I think, I know in New York and Chicago, the 829 painters also work in theater and work in film.
Mhm.
well,
Yes.
and TV. Yeah.
Now, that brings up a whole other area, is film. You, with many of the same skills, you can make a really good living working on as you know, an assistant art director, an art director, production designer. They have positions called scenic art. I'm sorry, set designers. All these things. To do that, you kind of, I think, need to go to where that work happens, and perhaps Los Angeles is a good place, or New York, and to work. The Art Directors Guild in Los Angeles also has an I don't know what it's called. It's sort of an internship program that is quite competitive to get into. But once you get into it, you are hired by other production designers and art directors to work for them, and then you ultimately get into the guild. The Art Directors Guild is much easier to get into now. It's not the completely closed shop that it once was. So that's very good. But a lot of my students end up start out by going to Los Angeles and end up working in film as well as theater there.
And I think post-COVID, a lot of our students moved into theater and film as well.
Yeah.
And also it has theater designers make really good production designers and art directors.
Yes.
Because their process is so thorough. And every time one of our students has moved into theater, TV and film, they've been applauded for their process.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, theater training is excellent training for the other entertainment design fields.
Well, let's talk about that. We might. What are they? What are other things so we think about Broadway or Lord Theater. There's also, there's all the cruise ship design. I mean, every cruise ship has a theater. Mm-hmm. and there are a lot of them, and they do a lot of shows. And I personally don't know how you make that connection, how you get in that door. If John Iacobelli was doing that, did some work.
I could talk about that a little bit, at least from my perspective. I started designing shows in Chicago. I got to a certain level, and I kind of felt like I was hitting a ceiling, and I wasn't kind of moving up to some bigger theaters. So I did some scene painting for a commercial shop. They knew my other work, and they asked me to come on as to design corporate stuff, corporate meetings, trade show booths, all kinds of stuff. I did that for about 6 years. By the end of it, I was running a staff of about 5 people, 5 other designers. And I ultimately stopped because I felt like a manager, not a designer by that time. But I felt like my skills really improved. I had to work faster. I had to sell my ideas. So I got much more confident about talking about my work to directors and so forth. And ultimately, when I was still continuing to do some theater, but when I gave that up entirely, my career went up rapidly, because I just had learned a lot more and was more confident about what I knew. So I would definitely say be open to those other opportunities when they show up. Even if you feel like, oh, I really want to be in theater, or I really want to be in film, it's worth looking at some other options that come up, even if it's just something you do for a few years and you learn a lot from it, and then you take that back to somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think the learning curve is not very steep.
Yeah.
For doing themed environments, I did a lot of trade shows. I did a lot of museum exhibitions, and besides learning some things about ADA compliance, et cetera, it's like good design is good design, and it's all visual storytelling. And I think it's I did not find it very hard to foray into.
No, and they're always looking for people. Those firms are always looking for people.
They are. Yep. And also, you also learn to work really fast. And one of the things I learned about doing corporate work is that there's always enough time. If someone says to you, you have 6 months, she's like, that's enough time. If someone says to you, you have a month, you're like, that's enough time. If they say you have a week, enough time. If they say, I need a design in 2 hours, you're like, that's enough time. Now,
Yep.
you need to kind of adjust the criteria, right? And adjust the expectations. But if someone says they need a design in 25 minutes, you can do it. It's not going to be a final model, but you
Right.
will find a way to make that happen. So
Yeah.
But it might be if you already have the model.
exactly right.
Where is it? Get it off the shelf.
Here's an idea I never used. This could
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
Well, the ideas I never used, I think it's an important part of learning to design too, is, I had a director friend that used to call it killing the babies. You have these ideas that are just your babies, and sometimes you just have to say, well, that doesn't fit in this show anymore.
Yep.
That was last week's idea.
I always say, date an idea, don't marry it.
Right, there you go. Yeah.
How many of us sitting here use, old model parts to mock up models? Yeah. I mean, that's a very useful, very quick way to get ideas out of your head into a model box to look at.
And never throw away any furniture. Get a chest of drawers and label them, right? And put all your tables, it's, all that stuff, because you will always use it.
Yeah. And the thing is, if you build really nice model furniture, you'll use it again and again and again and again,
So let's talk about some skills that maybe those of us sitting here have no interest in or wouldn't participate in, but that as young students you might really look into. Many of my students use 3D printers to build the dreaded staircases and furniture. And they're very good at it, and they have convinced me. The same thing with things like Cricut cutters and
laser cutters
are
invaluable.
It is very good. If you want to assist, if you think that might be a direction you want to go in the early part of your career to assist other designers, if you bring all that stuff with you, you're invaluable. Not only the knowledge of how to do it, but if you actually have a 3D printer and a Cricut cutter that you can say, oh, I have these. I mean, that you're valuable. What's
a Cricut cutter, Ralph?
Cricut cutter is a Cricut cutter is something. I'm not incredibly knowledgeable, but it's something used by sign painters, particularly to cut out vinyl stencils and things. And it's some kind of a sharp thing that moves around and cuts things, but it's not. It's a blade-like thing. It's not a laser. But it does. We did a test in a model making class, and I had one student who had one build a staircase using the Cricut cutter, and another student just built it with an X-Acto, number 11 X-Acto blade, cutting all the pieces out. And we looked at them together, and you couldn't tell the difference. But the Cricut cutter was a lot faster. Was the difference. And it sold me on the idea that if you didn't have to pick up an X-Acto knife again, maybe okay,
Yeah, I mean, there's no cheating. There's just faster ways.
Right, that's right. There's no cheating.
Yeah. I mean, I
except for AI, that's cheating.
Yes. AI is a very difficult.
I'm not so sure it's cheating.
That's a tough subject.
I think it's cheating. I think it's cheating if you haven't write papers and compose music. But if you type in something like fuzzy blue submarine, whatever, and whatever it turns out, you deem to be useful and interesting and compelling and appropriate for the project, that's still design.
If if you're using it as a way of getting inspired, that's one thing. If you're using it as a sort of a global plagiarizing machine, it's something else entirely.
Well,
Right.
yeah, well, I've
But
not
it's
seen
interesting,
anything.
it's not
Yeah.
really plagiarizing. I mean, I didn't understand this. It does it from scratch. It doesn't, it's not cut and paste.
Right, but it's looking at, okay, I just saw today a set for Annie, one scene of Annie.
No,
that
I've
was
seen
AI.
this.
What's that?
I've
You
seen
need it?
this. Yes.
And my understanding is that the program looks for every version of Annie that ever existed, unless you're telling it specifically, like, design me a 1910, what's the word I'm
Mansion.
looking for?
Right.
Yeah,
So
um,
but it doesn't, it looks at them all and then it draws it itself.
right.
Yeah.
It paints it itself. It would
But
be
the
as if-
designs are
it would
usually
be-
pretty terrible. And I remember
Right, they are.
so-
They're terrible.
someone
Well-
sent me a design for August Osage County that was like 9 stories tall.
Yes.
That would not fit in the Met.
I've
Well,
seen
This design had
seen,
bunk beds that
very-
you had to climb a
but
12-foot
also
ladder to get into.
that Annie said particularly, what the person didn't, what AI or whatever the program was they were
Yeah.
using doesn't understand is storage space backstage.
Exactly. That was exactly it. It was
Yeah.
one scene. It was one
I mean,
scene
I
out of 20
suppose,
scenes.
but-
Yeah.
But what we must accept is, next year it will understand storage
Yeah,
space.
maybe.
Or at some point it will. It will grow very, very quickly to do the things soon that it can't do now. Perhaps we don't
Well,
allow
it's
it.
still in the early days.
Yeah, we don't. We won't. We discourage students. We basically tell them we don't want you to use it. Not we don't allow it, but we say don't use it. We worry that it will detract from their educational process.
Mhm.
I mean, if we were teaching a class using it, that would be different.
Uh-uh.
But we're
Mhm.
not. So
That'll be interesting how it all shakes down in the long
yeah,
run.
it will be.
I think Charlie wants to ask us a question.
I have another question in Q&A. It's been sitting there for a second. If we can come back to this discussion about skills, it's
Sure.
really this is a question from Aiden. When going into the professional world as a designer, should I try applying for scenic jobs right away, scenic design jobs right away, or should I try to work in places as a scenic artist or a carpenter to try to build some of those connections first?
I would say you're not. And everyone correct me if I'm misspeaking, but
I don't know why he doesn't.
you can send around a portfolio or your website to various theaters. No one will hire you. Scenic designers are hired by references and requests by
Right.
directors or perhaps other designers on the project.
Mhm.
You're not going to get work cold calling or anything like that. You might get assistant work that way, though.
On your video.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think
I
that
think that's
there,
true.
and I think the direct answer to the question is yes, both. I think it's really important to be working in the business. If you're working someplace as a carpenter and designing someplace else, working someplace else, freelancing someplace else as a designer, it's important to be in the business and because you're going to find more opportunities in the business than you are going to find waiting tables. As long as you're inside the door somewhere, you have the possibility of opportunities.
Mhm.
Also in this Q&A, there was a comment about AI and it sometimes does actually scour the internet to use merging some of those images. I'm not sure if that's actually a question, but I think a comment on that topic. But another question that came up, which is really great, is students are often taught how to find jobs in the theater industry, but where do we go to find those jobs, like in film or corporate design and things like that? What are the resources for that?
it's going to be working for somebody as an assistant probably and working their way up.
I'll just say I got corporate work by, well, my work as a set designer was known, but also just by talking to going to the commercial shops and talking to them.
Mhm.
They're often looking for designers. Film, I have done some film, and I'm trying to remember. Yes, that in those cases, I was asked by somebody who I knew from theater, but who was now working in film.
You know, if you were a talented, skilled assistant and you went to New York, you would find out who was designing film and assisting and you know what that whole world was, and you would contact them. I mean, people are pretty generous as far as looking at your work. There are also on the West Coast and on the East Coast, I believe, in California, in Los Angeles, there is something called Design West. What's the full name?
Showcase West?
Design Showcase West. Thank you. That happens every June at UCLA. It's sort of sponsored by UCLA. And a lot of schools get invited for their graduate students. Now, this is, I think, only graduate, but I'm
Only
not sure.
grads, yeah.
To show their work. And a lot of people come there looking for assistance and to hire people. And there's one in New York, which may be called Design Showcase East. That's
It
good. You can call designers. How do you find out their phone numbers? I don't know. You might contact them through websites and things, if they have email addresses, and send them. I mean, if you're serious at this point in your life, you must have a website that shows your work to its best advantage and shows your best work. And nothing there should be nothing on it that would make someone not want to hire you. Only work that makes them want to hire you, even if it's limited in size. And if you don't know what a good website would look like, look at many other, just look up just other designers you respect. People, I mean, Todd has a website. I don't have a website. Douglas, do you have a website?
No, I don't.
Some of the us older folks, we don't have websites because we didn't have use for them. If anyone who teaches at any university except me has a website, because the universities require it often, and so you can see. And on that you can leave messages and contact, but also you can look and see what a good website looks like, or you can see a variety of websites and decide which one you like, which style you like, and what they put in.
Yeah, my website is geared toward students. It's not geared toward getting me work. So I include a lot of process in my website in terms of drawing, sketches, rough sketches, models, things like that. So it's really
You're
not
trying
about
to attract students to come and study with you.
Yeah, that, and also just to show them a model process. Yeah. So that's the only reason why I have a website. So
yeah, I think and probably many of you can testify to this. Once you actually start getting work, you don't have to look for work very much, because people will call you.
Totally true.
Well, Ralph is gonna put
No,
a caveat on there.
I have a very corollary to this. Never be a dead end, right? When someone calls you, if you don't want to do the job or can't do the job or whatever, always have someone you can recommend, because that way people will know that you're not a dead end. They, that if you can't do it, you'll have a name. You'll provide another name. And this doesn't only have to do with, design jobs, but assistants and scenic art. Do you know a good painter? Do you know? Always have that information. Keep that. Be someone who people want to call.
Yeah, and also I think too, if you're interested in working at certain venue, reach out to your faculty, reach out to other people and have them call ahead. Because it's much better if you say, listen, I really want to work at the Guthrie. And I say, okay, I looked at your stuff. I'll call them and I'll say, listen, you should really look at this person's work. It's really compelling and really interesting. And just use your contacts. And I also think too, it's really important. If you don't have time to do the show, don't do it. And theaters will respect that. You can say to them, you know what, I really, really want to work at your theater. I'm really interested, but I'm really overwhelmed and I can't give it. I can't do my best work under this schedule with my current schedule. I've never had a theater not call me again because I said that.
Right.
So, yeah.
We have a question while you're talking about portfolios and websites about this. The question is about how much of a portfolio ought to include some of that process material versus production photos and show photos.
Well, I think, you can divide a website up so that a director is not going to want to look at your ground plans probably, or your drafting, but another designer might. So if you have things broken down in that way, so that someone who's just interested in seeing the shows you've designed can look at photos of produced work and or projects. I mean, so you have produced work, projects, and then whatever you want to call it, technical drawings or drafting or design elevations or all of that part of it. And then there might also be something that shows your ability with puppets or prop making or other talents that you have. If you are this person who owns the
Laser cutter.
Not the laser cutter, but the 3D printer, you might show some, that some complicated thing you made with your 3D printer that everyone would say, "Ooh, I want him to do that in my office," or look what she can accomplish. But you break it down so that people can look at what they want to.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think that what you need to be showing on your website changes as you progress. I think early on, you want to show that you're artistic and that you're committed to doing beautiful work. You may not have any production photographs, but you may have 3 or 4 beautiful models and a half a dozen stunning paint elevations. But later on, you're going to have more production photos, and I think it evolves so that you're showing yourself what it is you can do and what it is you're all about artistically. I think that's really the important part of it. And I think that, sure. I mean, if you're getting started and you know that assisting is going to be a big part of the next half dozen years or so, well, then you show that you've got this 3D printer and this laser cutter. You bought them, you own them, you use them, and it's going to be able to, you'll use them as an assistant.
And I would suggest in the realm of drafting, it is rare for anyone under the age of 40 to hand draft, I would say. But if you do hand draft, that's wonderful to include, if it's beautiful. But what designers would like to see is, yes, that you know your way around a ground plan and it's laid out well, etc. But also some piece of architectural scenery that has lots of details, that requires lots of sections to explain it. We don't want to see rectangles drawn in AutoCAD. It's yes, AutoCAD draws beautiful rectangles, but that doesn't show us that that someone really knows how to draft a piece of scenery.
Yeah, I think is because it's the relationship between drafting and drawing that is part of hand drafting that is so important. And of course, the goal originally with computer drafting was to make it look like hand drafting, and it's kind of evolved elsewhere. But, you know, a good computer drafting is well laid out, has lots of sections, et cetera, et cetera. Its roots are in what we do in hand drafting.
Yeah, to answer this question that I see, can a young designer make a career as a designer using more digital-based skills and process with programs like Vectorworks, Photoshop, SketchUp, Twinmotion, etc.? Yes, absolutely, yes. Photoshop, yes.
Yeah.
You know, extremely important to have, I would say,
Digital
almost
skills.
advanced skills in Photoshop.
Yeah. I agree. And of course, what we want to think of all of those things is just think of them as tools to apply to the work. And then the difference between Photoshop and a pencil becomes a difference in your choice for the thing that you're making, rather than you can only do one or the other.
Right.
Someone's followed up with that question asking if this group has a preference on CAD programs.
AutoCAD for me.
Yeah,
know-
It's
AutoCAD
expensive
for me
though.
too.
It's
It's
expensive. though.
expensive, but it's personal preference.
Yeah.
I mean, I jumped on AutoCAD because it's a line-based program and as close to hand drawing as possible. But I mean, I think Vectorworks or AutoCAD, I think they're
I don't use either of them, but I am told that in Los Angeles, you need Vectorworks. And the other thing you really need, interestingly enough, is SketchUp.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is interesting and has to do with the Art Directors Guild. Is in the old days, before computer programs, art directors and assistant art directors and production designers could do perspective drawings of what they wanted, right? They didn't draft it, but they did beautiful perspective drawings. And other people did the drafting that went to the construction coordinator. SketchUp has replaced those drawings. You know, those beautiful hand drawings is now done with Vectorworks, with SketchUp. And in fact, you can also extract drafting from SketchUp. So it's a little fuzzy, but so the art directors and the assistant art directors and the production designers use SketchUp. So knowing, really knowing your way around SketchUp is a very, very valuable tool. Sometimes the bane of my existence as a teacher, because everything comes in SketchUp and not, no hand drawing. But
yeah, it's a useful tool, but I can't stand SketchUp drawings.
Yeah, I know. It's very sad if you.
No.
The Art Directors Guild used to have portfolios of art directors and production designers on their website. And you would see these, I don't remember the names, people we perhaps never heard of, or who did many films, and you would see the early work, these astonishingly beautiful drawings, and then it all, at a certain point, it all just became SketchUp lines.
Yeah, but a whole lot of concept artists in film do it by hand.
Yes,
I mean they do it on a tablet, but it's by hand. So
Yeah.
Yes, you mean digitally, but
they can do it really fast.
Yes.
And also production designers and art directors who are essentially draftspeople, they need to be able to draft by hand because they could be on a location where the power goes out.
Yep.
Also, the hand drafting, I think, is still sometimes prevalent in Los Angeles.
Faster.
If you have an office with 5 people drafting a movie, and you're responsible for them, supervising them, we know no one drafts on 30 by 44 inch monitors, right? Everyone is on a laptop or maybe a monitor of a certain size. So if you're looking at a corner, which is very, very, of something, or if you want to see the whole thing and it opens up, it just becomes a big white blob on the screen.
Mhm.
Whereas if someone is hand drafting, you can just look over their shoulder to what they're doing. And you can see the drawing they're doing. And you can see if it's what you want them to be doing. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think hand drafting is still practiced.
Mhm. Yeah. I think that brings up another, your reference there, Ralph, brings up another thing is the difference between being a designer who's like got 6 assistants in the studio and you're really running a business, or being a designer who's more selective, working with just 1 or 2 assistants or working by themselves, and the difference in the designer's connection to the design, and the difference in the approach that comes from that, because I think they're different career paths in a way.
Well, yes. I mean, I said this before we started this to the other people. I mean, I think, you know, one of the choices you make at a certain point is, do I want to be a business, or do I want to do the work myself more? And that doesn't mean you don't hire an assistant or 2 at times. But I mean, if you have an office and you are employing 4 people and they're depending on you, right? You know, then you have to have ideas every morning. You know, you have to have something for them to do. Otherwise, you're throwing money down the drain. And I never wanted that pressure, but that was just me. That's different if you live in one of the cities where there are the team or pool of people you can just call, you know, when you need them. And so if you take on a lot of work, let's say you have 2 shows going, you can, and you have enough room in your studio, you can bring in a bunch of people. But it is sort of a, you know, but there are designers. So historically, I guess we could say, Derek McLean and a few other people back in the 80s decided to make theater design, set design, more of a business, and to take it out of the apartment, so that you didn't work out of your own apartment. You had a studio that you went to, or an office, and there's a lot of people who have followed that path. And you know, and obviously Derek has been very successful at it. But it's a choice that you can make. If you know, it will affect other choices, like how you earn a living, if you're only going to do 1 show at a time or 2 shows at a time. I don't know. I mean, Doug, how many assistants have you ever employed at once?
Oh, I've had 4 or 5 at times. It started to verge on being a business.
Yeah.
And I felt the pressure that you described, very much, trying to keep everybody productive and doing work. And the backside of that is you don't want to lose them in the downtime either.
Yes.
You don't want to send them home and then all of a sudden something comes along. And personally, I always tried to hire people that were better than me, and they were always in demand, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
You really want good people. So I count myself as a failure in the business, but was somewhat successful as a designer. You know?
Todd,
But
how
also-
many people do you employ?
Well, I also found too that I don't know how you feel about this, Ralph, but you know, up until like 8, 9 years ago, I was drafting every show by hand, and I would draft all of them. I would do all the drafting. I had assistants building models and other things, and I knew every stick of molding. I knew every detail, everything about them. And I remember when I transitioned into having a number of assistants and doing way too many shows, is that I lost track of those details. And so there were things I would walk in the theater and be like, yeah, that doesn't quite look right, because I couldn't go back and look at a drawing that I didn't generate. And you know what I mean? Like I couldn't, like it was really hard for me to look at a drawing I didn't generate in AutoCAD and look and fine tune every detail.
I got
so
very
that was
lazy
challenge-
about
yeah.
supervising the drawings of the others.
I did
And
too. Me too.
I walked into a theater once and there were 2 windows missing.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, totally. And I know that Ralph, you didn't you import hand drawings into Photoshop? Wasn't that true?
No, I draft in Photoshop.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's how I do it.
It's like, I say, it's like pulling a plow with a Mercedes Benz.
Oh my God.
But
You know,
I
we would-
like it. It's not any faster. I just enjoy doing it.
Yeah, and I draft everything in by hand, and then I pass it off to an assistant because
Right.
that's how I think. And
I've been organizing a lot of my work and I miss that hand drafting that I used to do.
well, your hand drafting was beautiful. So
The lettering was never good.
You learn from the best.
You know, we've been importing paint elevations into Photoshop to clean and, you know, sometimes add a texture, that sort of thing. And the reason that I started doing that was a theater lost the entire set of paint elevations, hand done paint elevations for a show, and expected me to do them over. And of course, if I wanted the show painted the way I wanted it painted, I had to do them over. I thought that's not going to happen again. We're gonna have this. We're gonna even, you know, even if I do the thing 100% by hand, it's going into the computer and getting scanned and then getting printed. So I've got another copy if I need it, and it's come in handy.
In terms of students out there who, because I think everyone does, at least all of my students do their paint elevations on their computers.
Uh-huh.
If you're going to do that, you got to buy that $600 printer to print it, and you got to,
Yes,
you
you
got to buy a good printer and use the paper the printer recommends,
Yes.
so that you can get, so that the elevation that you hand to the scenic artist, they cannot paint from a iPad, you know, looking at a digital. I mean, they
Right.
can, but they don't
well, you
want
can
to.
also just specify Sherman Williams colors in your paint elevations and Benjamin Moore
Yes,
colors. And
but if it's flat, but if it's
Yeah.
if it's something that is not one color, that is, you know, is glazed and has all those things that I do in Photoshop or like to do with my paint elevations.
Yeah.
I want a paint elevation that they can say, I want it to look just like this.
Yeah.
This is exactly what I want. And
Right.
it requires no talk about
Good photo.
the only note is
good
whether
photo.
it be gloss or matte.
Yeah.
You know, the surface.
And the other thing I would say
Requires
is,
a good printer.
yeah,
You can trust the
printer.
teenagers at Kinko's to you know, to print your paint elevations properly.
no, buy a good large format printer, print the things on great paper, and mount the damn paint elevations with notes rather than handing somebody a piece of paper. You know, it still represents you, and if it represents you, it needs to look like it came out of a professional studio. And I think that's something that I think that students and young designers, young professionals, have a tendency to get cheap, and I think that's a false economy, because you make yourself look cheap.
Well, you used to, and Doug can attest to this, there used to be this sort of understanding that if the work you turned into the shop was beautiful, beautifully drafted, a beautiful model, that you cared and that you really wanted it to be that.
Yes.
And, you know, you still had to fight for it and you know, keep yourself from getting screwed, but there was a little bit of, but if you turned in like bad stuff, you know, sloppy drafting and you know, bad paint elevations and things like that, you know, what could you expect in return?
Yeah, what you get.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
also-
true. And I always credit Ming for that.
Oh,
You
yes.
always make the drawing better than you want it, because it's always gonna be less.
Mm-hmm.
and also, and
Sad-
it speaks for you when you're not around.
Yeah.
But the sad part now, you know, is our drawings used to go out on the floor and be built And that doesn't happen anymore. I mean, I don't think the people who build our scenery are drafted. Someone in an office who's doing the technical drawings.
Absolutely, that's what happens.
Oh.
And so but it's still true with the paint elevations and a model and things like that.
Remember, as a scenic carpenter, I remember clearing my sinuses every morning from grabbing those blue lines out of those machines.
There's a good question
The
coming up.
ammonia smell.
Charlie, you want to throw this question at us?
Yes, I'm glad this came in. This is maybe we're running short on time, but this is a really great question. How does one handle grad school in the sense of like work-life balance and self-care?
I have a point of view about that since I've run a few grad programs. And my point of view about that is grad school is a very short period of time. And there's a mountain of things for you to learn and master. Get your balance later. Do the work. I mean, because this chance to be in grad school around a lot of people who are going to help you, advise you, teach you, it doesn't last forever. It's a very brief period of time, and take every advantage of it that you possibly can.
Good answer.
Before we wrap up, Charlie, those who are in the audience, I want to ask you to do something for us. As a group, we're going to continue to offer these kinds of workshops, discussions, Q&As. We've got one scheduled for the conference coming up in Seattle. Is that the next conference? Seattle. The thing I want people in the audience to do is feel free to, because I'm the organizer who writes to everybody in this group. I'm sort of the secretary right now. If there are topics that you want us to address, would you send me an email or a text or give me a call? My contact information is on my website. Let me know if there are things that you want us to address or to cover in sessions like this, because we're only too happy to do it. But we really want to know what it is that you want us to talk about, as well as the things that we want to talk about. So feel free to do that. Like I said, my contact information is on my website. You can call me, text me, or email me this information, and I'll spread it through the group.
So great. I'm gonna actually, can I put your website in the chat, Joe?
Sure. It's just joetilford.com. It's pretty straightforward. Yeah, do that, and that way people can get a hold of me.
Mm.
All right. Great. Well, listen, I can't thank you panelists enough for being here. This is a really great group and a great resource. And thank you to all of the attendees, and especially those that were popping in those questions. It was really great. So, and thanks, Christine, for setting everything up.
Christine coming back to see us. Yes. Thank you, Christine. Absolutely. Great of you to do this.
Thank you, folks. I appreciate all your time, as in China appreciates your time. Thanks very much for joining us here. And we look forward to the next conversation.
All right.
Everybody have a wonderful evening, and get in touch with Christine at usitt.org if you can't get to Mr. Tilford yourself. I'd be happy to forward some questions for you.
All right. Great.
Thanks,
Good night,
folks.
everyone.
Have a
See
good
you
night,
all.
everybody.
Bye-bye.